So thank you so much for being in the call, and thank you so much for Chelsea, Monica, and Clay for presenting today and helping us understand their project. They will share about a task designated to highlight the numeracy cycle through the additional lens of the first people principles of learning. So we're very grateful of you sharing your information. Thank you so much. We will be here until 5 p.m. Because you three are presenting, so you can divide the time accordingly. We just suggest to leave some time at the end for questions. And if you don't mind, I will let you know 10 minutes before we are finishing the call, and maybe taking the 2 last minutes just for final closing words from our side. Thank you so much, and please welcome.
Awesome. So everyone, I assume can see this screen. So Hadi, Chelsea Ross Tutsani, Saikas First Nation Sekeo. So hello, my name is Chelsea Ross, and I am a citizen of Saikas First Nation. I am the district coordinator for Aboriginal coordinator for SD73. And I'm here with the lovely Clay Cartie, who is the grade 6-7 teacher from Dallas Elementary, as well as Monica Bergeron, who is the the district coordinator for K-12 numeracy, is what it is. So we would just like to start off by acknowledging that we are on the territory of the Secwepemc Nation, specifically the territory of the Takamouth Secwepemc people in Secwepemc-Gulu. So that's where we are. Beautiful picture of Mount Peter, Mount Paul. So how our project got started is I was asked to be part of a pilot project for gathering the tools around Indigenous foods. And as part of that pilot project, we had to have an Indigenous foods project. So what I did is I contacted the cultural educator, which is Jackie Jules, and her and I were talking, and she mentioned the creation of an Indigenous garden, which my team and we decided, well, that would be awesome because it's the perfect choice, as the land is our greatest teacher. So that's kind of how this all got started. So what ended up happening, our intention is we wanted to design an Indigenous food project in which Indigenous ecosystems would flourish and obviously enhance inclusive education. And we wanted to build a positive, respectful relationship with our local Indigenous communities. So I got talking to people and I was talking with Monica, and she mentioned the IMN, which we felt was a perfect fit. So we roped in Darren Clark, who works here as well as a resource teacher. And then we needed a school. So Clay Cartie and Jody Samuel, which is our 2 grade 6-7 teachers at Dallas Elementary, also joined us. And we decided to develop a measurement unit based on Indigenous storytelling. We also, the district coordinator for trades and technology transition, she decided, well, I was talking to her about the project, so it kind of organically grew. And we're like, hey, let's build some benches and a storage bench. So we're like, okay, sounds good. So we're actually going to be doing that at the end of June, is we're going to be building those. And then I also got the opportunity to meet with some other people. So I got to meet with Shalay Garson, and I got to see a food forest as well as a vegetable garden at Skeeterson Community School. I got to meet with Brenda Jules, who had a garden, Indigenous garden, just a smaller one at a local school. Brock Middle School, they had a food sustainability program. So I got the opportunity to meet with him to learn more, as well as someone who just had a school garden, but it wasn't Indigenous based. So I met with him to see how his school garden worked. And just, as the network of collaborators, knowledge was built, this holistic unit just kind of organically grew, which was really cool. So with this, we wanted our Indigenous garden project, we wanted to focus on measurement unit because we knew that hadn't been done yet. And obviously we wanted to focus on Indigenous story work. So we all met as a group, and we are actually quite a very large team. So this is the whole team. So there's myself as part of it, Monica, Darren Clark, who's not here. Kelly Bennett is the Aboriginal education worker at Dallas Elementary. So she's not here, but she was a big part of it. Jody Samuel's the other grade 6-7 teacher, and then Clay Cartie. So once again, a nice big team, which was wonderful. And our inquiry question came out when we met was, well, how does our knowledge of Indigenous story work, local plants, and measurement concepts support our creation of an ideal garden? So that's kind of what our inquiry question was. And what we wanted to do was really create a unit where our students took on that role of a permaculture Indigenous garden specialist. And we thought the easiest way to do this was to kind of divide the unit into sections, so that we ensured that our students had all the background knowledge that they needed in order to create it. So our first section kind of involved a lot of Kelly and myself, as well as other community partners. So we have our story of grasshopper and ant. We want to introduce the 4 R's as well as do plant exploration. So our first section was 4 lessons. Our first lesson, we actually invited our cultural educator, Jackie Jules, in. She shared the story of grasshopper and ant with the students, as well as introduced kind of any protocols and introduced the kids more to the cultural aspect of it. And so there's some pictures of them, and as you can see, they're quite engaged with her story, which was wonderful. And this really grounded our unit, is what we wanted it to be. We then took that story and the kids had to kind of decide. We had the first people's principle of learning, which a lot of our students have been learning since kindergarten. So this is kind of, they know a lot of these, but we said, okay, well, where does this story fit in? Like really, and they had to pick only one. And it was kind of cool because they had a lot of trouble picking one where the story fit in, because they realized it's just woven in everything part of the story. And we had a discussion around that. And then we also incorporated our district literacy team. Oh, sorry, we did the 4 R's first. So this is kind of where we introduced the students to the 4 R's. We talked about it, but we didn't spend a huge amount of time on it. It was more just to kind of, here it is, kind of plant that seed with our respect, responsibility, reverence, and reciprocity to go with the story, as well as weave it in throughout the unit. And then with our district literacy team, we talked about using loose parts. So we had the students, they got to use loose parts, they created their favorite part from the story and then wrote about what the story taught them. So this was kind of lots of fun. They had a ton of fun doing this part. So the first part, we really didn't focus on mathematics that much. It was more about giving them that background knowledge to go with those cultural principles, as well as the plants that they're going to be using for their garden. The next 3 lessons, the first lesson, Kelly Bennett introduced the students to the local plants. So Kelly does harvest, so she introduced them to harvest protocols of what's expected if you're going to go out and harvest. She had the opportunity to show them some of her tinctures as well as salves that she had made. The kids had the opportunity to smell it, to see it, see them dried, and then kind of reflect on what they look like in the springtime, because obviously when this was being shown, they weren't actually out yet, but they did have the opportunity to see them out after. So that was our first plant lesson. Then our next plant lesson, what we did is we actually made up our plant cards, which were all 8.5 by 11s. And we just gave the kids pictures of the plant. And just like they had when Kelly had showed them the dry plants and the tinctures and everything, we said, well, okay, well, what do you really see? What do you think? What do you wonder? And they only had the pictures to look at. So they kind of got in there in pairs. So they talked about it. Then afterwards, we gave them more information about that plant. And then what they had to do was actually find out the plant name in English as well, Secwepemc. We talked about too, because in our area, there's actually 3 dialects. There's Northern, Western, and Eastern. So we talked about why we use the Western dialect, because that is where Tecumseh to Secwepemc, that's what we use. They had to do 3 interesting facts to the plants and then kind of what they're still wondering. What is it they still want to know? The other thing we got them to do is use the First Voices app and to know how to pronounce that word correctly in Secwepemc. And then as a reflection question, we asked them, okay, well, why do you think it's really important that we're learning the local language? So why are we learning Secwepemc? So just to kind of get them to think of that as well. And then our last plant lesson, they actually made up their own little garden books that they could refer back to when they were designing their garden. So Kelly and I, ahead of time, along with the plant cards, we had kind of already narrowed down what types of plants we were going to be able to use to plant in our garden and what would be available. So that's what we ensured we kind of also taught them about, just because we knew these plants were already available and we could actually purchase them from a nursery. And then as Kelly and I were doing this though, the math teachers were also doing their thing at the same time. So I'm going to actually turn it over to Clay Cartie, and he's going to talk about the next 2 slides.
So this fit into our measurement unit really well, both grade 6 and 7 curriculum. And you can even add in, change it slightly to get younger curriculum or older curriculum, right? To make it more complex. And so these are the concepts that we covered. So the metric system, and then conversions, because a lot of stuff that you see outside of the classroom in the construction area is still the standard system, right? So we did math conversions as well, but use the metric system. Talked about perimeter and area of different shapes, circumference, area of a circle, volume of rectangular prism, and displacement, all things that we were going to have to use for this garden. So how big is the garden going to be? We have planters that we had bought, so we had to figure out how much volume, how much dirt are we going to need. And then the cool or a neat concept, I think is neat anyway, I'm not sure if the kids thought it was that neat, but displacement, understanding displacement, and that like if you take dirt out to put a plant in, it's going to take up that space. And so just understanding that, and that was a more complex one where you had perimeter, a student could design the fence, right? And design the benches inside if we're creating a gathering area as well. And so just the idea that it covered so many different areas of our math curriculum was very appealing to me as well. I think.
So that was the first section, is how we broke it in. So then we come to section 3, which was our first planning stage. So we put the kids into groups. So part of it, this is where we introduced our inquiry question. So the kids were actually given that inquiry question. We didn't introduce it at the very beginning. We just kind of went over what we had already done. So to kind of remind them, okay, well, what's our plan exploration? Make sure we got that connection back to the story, our first people's principles of learning. And then we did a fun little activity because we put them into groups of 3. So we did a fun activity where they actually had to build. What it was is, you can see from the picture here, so there'd be one string in per bag, and they all had their own bag, and one person would go out, look at it, look at the beads, and then they'd have to come back and help their teammates build the string in that. So that was lots of fun. And then we also had a discussion. Okay, well, what do we know about our Indigenous plants? So what have we learned? What have we also learned about measurement? So to kind of read that, what are we still wondering? So this, once again, there were their groups that they're going to be doing this project with. So there's a group of 3. And then what did they still need to learn? So that if we needed to help them learn stuff, we needed to know, okay, well, what do you still need to learn that we need to help you with? Because we wanted to let them know. And then another fun thing we did with them is we just said, okay, there's no limits. Like, the sky is the limit. There's no money is the limit. You can do whatever you want. Let's build. What would your ideal garden be? There were some really interesting ones. I don't know. So we had ones with a duck pond and everything. And it was more just to make it more fun and just to get the creative juices flowing is why we did that. So then I'm going to turn it back to Clay, because after we did that fun little activity and lesson plan, we introduced our actual numeracy task. So yeah.
So this was kind of the area. So once we got kind of our go ahead from the district on size and whatnot, Darren Clark, one of the other members of the team, put together this question and this numeracy task, and also provided us with these really good, they actually laminated these big sheets, and the kids worked on them standing only, basically. And so they all did vertical math with it all the time. And so it was great because we could use whiteboard markers, because like you probably know, the plan doesn't always go the way it's supposed to. So it's a lot of change and a lot of move and but it was really neat. And we used the grid for the each square was 1 foot by 1 foot. So that was kind of, we talked about, like, we had metric system and the standard system, and made it simpler for them with the 1 foot by 1 foot and this design, right? And then we had Chalet come, who has designed these gardens before, and she gave us a really good kind of because it's easy to look at this on paper, but until you get out on the land and actually see what it's going to look like, or like what you're dealing with, it gives you much more of a holistic or like a broad approach. And so when she came, the kids could actually see, like, where does the sun hit, where, all the other different pieces that go into this that are beyond the math piece, right? And so this particular question and the design the kids were very interested in like who's gonna win or whose design are they gonna pick, and we kind of talked about like it wasn't necessarily about that, but just the idea that creating this garden and the math concepts that are already entwined in it, and the importance of like making it work for culturally making it work, and then making it work also with the math, right? And the two different entities that we are kind of like trying to connect and combine. And so this was the start of it, and we have some really cool ones that I think are later on in the slideshow that you can probably see in the videos.
And I think it's to be noted too, we also applied for funding, so we are actually going to be creating this. So like this is a space that is at the school that is going to be built, so that's what's kind of really cool about it. And the parameters, as you can see, just from in the Indigenous garden, from the task, right? Like they had one large square planter box, which is 6 by 6, which is actually donated to us. There were planters, as Clay had mentioned, that were already pre-bought, that were already built, like that Dallas already owned. So we were trying to utilize those as well as a fire pit. And then like we talked about how it's not just the garden, but also a gathering space where we're going to learn about different things. So that was kind of cool. So as Clay mentioned, so a community member that we did bring in was Shalay Garson. So she is a permaculture landscape designer. So she came and did workshops with the students, and like Clay said, she took them actually out onto the land, and she like made them think, okay, well, where does our sun rise? Which way's north? And one thing that we have is some hedges there. And at first we thought it wouldn't be good to plant by the hedges. And then Shalay informed us, she's like, no, you actually are going to create a microclimate there. So you actually want to plant your plants that want the most sun in that spot. And she really taught the kids about that. The other thing that's really cool, she introduced us to, because she is a designer, was the use of using our little squares here in our templates, because it really allowed the kids to easily move around their design while they were in that process of designing. There is a video here. I'm sure we'll be able to send out the link for our slideshow after if you do want to have a chance to watch it. It's just a 5-minute video, kind of tells more about what she does. And it was really neat. And the kids, like, she was a wealth of information, and the kids learned a ton from her. Yeah. So the kids were working on this. It was not a short project. It was definitely a long project. We started at the beginning of February, and then we had our celebration on the 24th of April. So there was like a big spring break in there. So it wasn't something that was short, just to let you know. It was definitely a longer project, which we knew going into it. It was most likely going to be that. But what we actually have for you is just a 5-minute video that does highlight the student voice. So I'm hoping that we can just press play and everyone's going to be able to see this in here.
I believe you have to share your sound, because if the video has sound, we are not able to hear.
Okay, do you know how to share sound?
Nope.
Oh, let's figure out how to share sound. I wonder if we could put the video in the chat then. Oh, there we go. Okay, let's try it. We got share. Okay, let's try again.
Hi, I'm Jackson, and today we are on the land of the unceded territory of the Secwepemc people, specifically the Tecumseh Secwepemc people. We have been planting our Indigenous gardens in your honor to show you.
I'm Alexis, and I'm Kian, and this is our Indigenous garden project. So down here in the bottom right corner, we have our mini design. So up top left, we're putting our big 6x6 garden bed. Then we're gonna have our small planter boxes along the fence. Then we're gonna have our harvest table right in the middle. And have our fire pit down here with benches equally around. And then we have a gate up here and a gate down here to enter and exit. And the gate down here is so that the water is closer to the gate so we can get it through, because the water's down here. And these are all of our plants that we could have put in all the measurements, but we didn't have enough room to put everything in, so these are the plants that we picked. And we picked certain plants that we thought would be most important for medicines and harvesting and eating. And this is our soil we needed, so like volume, base times height times depth. And we broke it down into inches so that it would be easier to multiply. So it would have been hard. Yeah.
And what are some of your benefits of having an Indigenous garden?
Some of our benefits are just going outside and getting fresh air. If you're having a stressful day, you can go outside and The plants will help with your stress. Connecting with your friends, harvesting crops, learning about Indigenous plants and other Indigenous stuff. Read Indigenous stories, it's good for your mental health. And then you can do math and science out there.
And how does your garden design honor Indigenous knowledge?
It's like a gathering place where we can tell stories, acknowledge the land, and it's not just any ordinary type of plants. Like some we have regular plants. Some of them aren't just ordinary plants. Some of them are supposedly native plants, such as Saskatoon, big sagebrush, and yarrow and stuff.
And what is something that you learned about yourself while completing this project?
I learned about myself that I actually really like learning about plants, and that I actually think it's actually something I want to do in my backyard, make a garden for fresh foods and stuff, because it's not very good now, how people put a bunch of chemicals in it and stuff to make it not go bad quickly. But it's not as healthy as it would be if you had your actual own garden, you're actually growing your own stuff.
I learned that I actually liked working in groups more than I thought that I would. I mostly like to keep it to myself and mainly choose my groups, but it was way better than I expected it to be, and it was actually a lot of fun.
And what is something you'd want to share to others who are thinking about doing this project?
Take your time, don't rush, and don't get nervous. You got lots of time to do this.
And don't make it a work thing, you have to do it. Do it as you want to do it, and it means something to you.
Yeah, when you're
What educational opportunities did this project provide for your students?
So many. In the BC curriculum for ADST, they are focusing on design and then looking at your design, going back, making adjustments. That was a huge part of this project. Of course, math was a great part, learning our volume, surface area, displacement, perimeter, all of those components. So that was a great part of it as well as the communication aspect. So being able to explain their thinking, to support their reasoning, support their decisions, that was great, especially when they were presenting their project in the presentation of learning. That was a large part of it as well.
And then I cut Clay off on the video. Sorry. So I don't know if Clay wants to talk about kind of what he felt he learned from the project, and then I can go to the last slide after.
I think the big thing I learned, especially with this particular one, is the understanding the land, first of all, and everything that comes from the land. I think it was Jackie Jules that said it, one of our people that were part of our team as well. Just the idea that the land doesn't really need us. We need the land much more than it needs us. And so just understanding that aspect before we went into this project. And then, of course, the math piece and how much it's and I learned this in the session that I was at earlier today, listening to just the idea, there's so much math already involved in a lot of the Indigenous practices and cultures. And so just finding it and utilizing it and incorporating it. And so that's one of the big things that I learned.
And just so as a wrap up, because the celebration, yes, it was a wrap up for the kids. As you saw, there's community members that came and we invited a lot of people to come. And so the students had the opportunity to really showcase what they learned. And I think that was a big thing too, is just the pride in the students, like showing what they learned to other people and like district members in our community. But we wanted to kind of do a little wrap up. So of course, in our culture, food is always great. So we came with bannock. So the kids, we had some bannock. We talked about everything we had done. And then the kids actually, we revisited the 4 R's again. And this time we really focused on okay, what are our 4 R's for our garden? Like, how are we going to show respect for our garden, reverence for the garden, responsibility, reciprocity? So that was kind of a cool, nice way to just kind of wrap everything up. And this is where we're going next.
Hi there. So, when Chelsea asked me to speak about what our considerations are for next time, like last year I worked on a pit house project. And the thing that I've learned in doing all these projects with the IMN is that it leads to the next thing all the time. And so when I was looking at the First People's Principles of Learning, I was thinking there were 4 of them that came to mind the most. And the first one is that learning is reflective, experiential, and relational. And you saw one of the teachers on there, Jody Samaro, she was talking about her experience, and she was mentioning to me when I was at the gallery walk that maybe bring in all of the experts at the beginning of the process could be really helpful, because as Clay spoke about chalet, she was the one that gave them the idea of those having the cutout the kids could use on their grids. And then she really took them outside and really gave them kind of a context for the whole thing. And Jody was saying that she thinks that would have made it come even more alive if she came earlier. So that's something really cool to learn. I also think further onto that is that if they could have the experts come in, then do their stuff, and then get the experts to look at it again. It's part of the whole scientific process to do that initial research, do some work, and then enter back into that inquiry cycle. So that could be cool. The other thing is that learning doesn't definitely involve patience and time. So the teachers that we worked with, so Clay, thank you very much, and Jody, who isn't here today, they were just willing to jump right in and realize that, okay, they're going to do their measurement concepts and give the kids some sort of contextual basis, but then the kids are going to learn on the fly as well. So they'll have to be naturally weaved into the project at critical junction. And Jody mentioned also that it was difficult to kind of get to the displacement part of the soil, because I mean, there's so much to cover, right? Clay, I don't know, did you find that too?
Yeah, we didn't quite get to that part.
Yeah, that was a tough concept anyway for grade 6 fun.
We did the bathtub where you jumped in the bathtub and all the water left.
Oh, and then that's what. Well, you know, that's probably interesting though to them. The other one is that learning involves recognizing the consequences of one's actions. So maybe they need to do some work around the cost of building a garden. So in this case, Chelsea and Clay had secured some funding to actually build a garden, but it kind of might be really neat, especially when we're hearing from that one student who's talking about difference between growing your own food instead of buying food. It would be kind of neat to have them do like a financial literacy piece alongside it and go, okay, what would be the difference between investing in building a garden and then compared to having to go to the store and continually buying carrots or lettuce or what have you. And then the last one, which is definitely not the least, is learning requires explorations of one's identity. And we did hear from that same student, kind of along the lines of what I was thinking is how could they then design a home garden based on costs and family needs? Because the community dynamics change when you go from your whole school dynamics to the nuclear family. And so it gives them a different contextual element to then go, oh, cool, I can take what I learned here and then apply it to a smaller group or a more real life situation that's personal to them. So.
Just just a note that there's 10 minutes left. So maybe we can give 5 minutes or so for questions. That would be great. Thank you.
Sounds great.
Oh, where's that stop share? Like, where's the stop share button? Oh, is there? No questions. Good job. No.
Oh, okay. Anybody questions?
We answered everything.
You seem to be very eager to share, and I guess you can share a lot with the video and with what you're working. I was particularly curious about the displacement part. I know sometimes when working on these topics it's harder to talk about topics that involve colonialism and the process of decolonizing, right? It might feel the more hard one because it can touch into a lot of personal experiences and whatnot. So my question is, like, are you pushing for both things? So like a process of indigenizing and a process of decolonizing? Is it okay if it's only touch on one? And yeah, how are you navigating your own process as Indigenous person, but also as non-Indigenous for the people that are involved, because we all go through that process, right? So how are you navigating those two kind of parallels, but very interlaced areas?
No, go ahead.
No, I just gonna say, for me right now, I think where I'm personally at in my journey is a lot more indigenization rather than the decolonization aspect. Obviously I want to get to that where I'm at. But I really, yeah, like right now I feel it's more trying to take something, indigenizing it, trying it out. Like, because Monica and I were talking, like, this is wonderful, but we weren't ready yet to give our curriculum out. And so that's the one thing about trying it again and then pushing that boundary just a little bit farther. Can we get out, like, do you know what I mean? But yeah, for me right now, where I'm on my journey, it's definitely more indigenization, less decolonization, I would say, for myself personally.
Can I just jump in there?
Yeah.
And when we were gathering together as teachers at the very beginning, we were talking about having the first people's principles of learning be the first thing that we did, rather than the math and then trying to make that fit onto the math, whereas looking first at those pieces and then going, where does the math naturally help them solve this particular life problem? So yeah, just that lens, that we tried to go through that lens. I'm saying, but
Just trying to think. Sorry, I'm just, yeah, there's a lot. I think indigenizing it, not as a non-Indigenous person, it's like I do see the challenge, and like I've talked to enough people, I think, and learned from a lot of people that are have much more education than I do, that if you're not willing to try, then that's where it stops. And the idea that we make mistakes is normal and human. And so that idea of like, that's almost kind of like decolonization in the sense like I get so used to this, like how everything has to work, and that's not always the way it is, and that's okay. And so I think, but we do focus mostly on indigenizing first, but when you can find teachable moments of decolonizing, you jump on it and you use them. And for me, it's more of a learning process because a non-Indigenous person, I try to take in as much as possible prior to trying to teach. I try to learn, and sometimes that helps with indigenizing the space, and kind of leads to more questions and more listening, which I need to be better at. But yeah.
Thank you. I also think that that could also be a pathway towards a strain-based approach, right? Starting with the Indigenous teachings and then later on. Thank you. I hope, does somebody else have more questions? Or
Thorough presentation, we did our job.
no, or do you want to, it seemed like you could keep on going. So if nobody else have questions and there's something else that you didn't have the time to share, you might want to share. Yeah, leave it there.
Well, I think where we want to go to next is actually have the curriculum up. So like on your the IMN website, like you could actually just go in there, see that curriculum, be like, oh yeah, I can do that in my area. Because this obviously is very based in Secwepemcúlecw. The plants that we chose are for our area. And so that's, I think, our next steps as well.
Our next step next year.
Next year is to get it where you've got the curriculum too. So you've got both pieces and you're able to implement it yourself in your own area. Is kind of where we would like to go next with this. I thank Monica because with her math, well, no, like with your math specialty, right? Like it made it really good. And I see someone else has their hand up, so I'll stop talking and I'll learn to listen. I'm about to say thank Clay too, and Jody, but I'll stop talking.
No, I was just thinking that in the previous session, they were talking about how the students were writing stories,
yeah,
and they were sharing with other schools. So I think that would be an interesting, if there is another school in another area creating gardens, how they can share their knowledge, especially the different type of plants and how they are affected because of the land and the challenges of the measurements. Because I hear a child saying that they use inches because it was easier, while others probably is using centimeters or meters and things like that. So the comparison, it will be great activity too.
Yeah.
I also think it's interesting where we live here in Tecumseh, Secwepemc territory. Like we have quite a different set of seasons, and so like we have where our school is in the valley near the river, so our growing season is even different. Our soil is different. The amount of sunlight we get. Whereas where I live, and my house is up high in the mountains where winter lasts like a month longer than where it does. Like I'll leave my house where there's snow on the ground and I'll go to work and it'll be green grass or decent weather, right? And so just understanding different areas and talking with other schools in those different areas about what works there and what doesn't and why, and just learning kind of that idea, because this entire territory, right, depending on where you live or where you are, kind of that dictates what grows and what doesn't and that kind of stuff. So
That's a great suggestion. Thank
Yeah,
you for that. We wrote that down
exactly. Yeah.
for our next school.
And so in terms of sharing, you were thinking of sharing to others, kind of like on a website, or in which format would you? Yeah. And
Yeah,
you,
so what we did last year with the Pit House project is we made it like templates of each of the different activities so that people could just then make a copy and change it for their area. So we had done pit houses, but then their school district 57 in Prince George was doing something on pit houses. And then we were hoping that we could get the two groups together and do a comparative cultures unit with them. So it'd be great if we could see a different biogeoclimatic zone do the same thing, do their own garden, and then talk to the kids about what are some of the things, like the things Clay was talking about. We have diverse needs around here in terms of the climate and the soil, but also can you imagine comparing this to like the West Coast, and well, we're in the desert. So yeah. So for now, we just have our slide deck that we can share to just inspire people to do that work, but we're open to lots of suggestions.
Yeah.
So I think we're almost the time. So thank you, Chelsea, Monica, Clay, for this great presentation. There are so many ideas, and I think all of us have now the interest and curiosity to apply some of your ideas. Thank you so much. We would like to remind you that the recordings will be available. I think they will be available first for all of the participants, and then they will be possible to be accessed in the website. And we want to thank you for participating in this event. And if you participated in the previous, so we want to thank you for participating in both events. There is in the information session, there is QR code where you can provide feedback, and we will appreciate your feedback. Any feedback will be good. Thank you so much, and have a nice evening for everybody.